All right, Ken Crenshaw. I really appreciate you joining me. He been with the Arizona Diamondbacks for a long time as the director of sports medicine and performance. I believe that's the correct
Yes,
title for you,
sir.
Ken. Among
Mhm.
although you do many other things, but I just wanted to start and say thanks. I know we were connected
Yeah.
through through Brad Johnson, who I've gotten to know, and you were on his show, so it's cool. You know, you're getting a lot of requests for podcasts these days, but
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I always enjoy just sharing with people and, trying to help somebody else get to wherever it is they want to go. And sometimes the experience and things that I've been lucky enough to have is helpful in that area.
absolutely, it really is. So we were saying right before we were recording, it's coming at an opportune time, I suppose, at least for the Diamondbacks. You guys are hot right now, and things seem to be clicking.
Yeah,
What's going on? Yeah,
no, I think we've been playing really good, and I think our team kind of mid-season started to find its identity of who they were, and how they actually complement each other. And we had some new guys earlier in the year, and I mean we had obviously a fantastic team last year, but every year's new players, and they have to adjust to each other, and they just seem like a great group of guys that play off of each other. Nobody tries to do too much. So, and we've had our share of injuries to some of our key guys, which has allowed some of our younger guys to get those reps, and they've stepped up and did a great job. And I think in the end that obviously helps everybody because it develops those younger guys too. But yeah, it's fun to watch. I'm just a passenger on the boat ride.
there you go. Well, I believe I mentioned it to you when we were catching up a week or two ago that I'm from Philadelphia, so I'm a huge Phillies fan. So last year was a tough one for us, at least.
Well,
But what?
sorry about it. We didn't feel the
Yeah,
same way, but I mean sometimes somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. I'm just glad we were on the upside of that one.
that's right. That's right. So what if I could ask you then, like what was it about that team do you think was able to overcome? Was that it was 2-0, right? I think headed back to Arizona and then you guys won the next two games and
Yeah,
then it went to a game 7. What was it about that team that was a little bit different?
yeah. It's funny. Every team I've ever been on that's been really good, made playoff runs, won World Series. There's always like a moment in the season when they just kind of, I don't know if it's find their identity or start to really see their capabilities. And I think, our team, we knew we had some good young players. I don't think we expected to do what we did, but we kind of got to a point where at the end of the year, we almost backed into the playoffs because we actually lost some of our last few games. Somebody else won. It allowed us to get in. And then, we played the Brewers and we were down early. I think, I don't even remember 3 or 4 runs. We ended up coming back and winning that game in Milwaukee. And in that moment, you could tell our guys were like, okay, all right. And then we end up doing it again the next night. End up, winning the series. And I could tell at that moment these younger guys had just taken that leap forward. If they were rookies, all of a sudden they became second year players. And they were just playing for each other, and we had this kind of mantra of like chaos, we had a really fast team. So we started putting pressure on the other teams, and we just carried that to the next series against the Dodgers and beat them. And then when we got to the Phillies, I think our guys believed that, hey, we can do this. We can go all the way. But we got to play our style of game. And that's, I think, what happened with the Phillies, is we came in and we just played really fast baseball and we end up winning some close games. And, all of a sudden we get down to the last game and we're like, all right, we're going to do this thing. I felt like standing there the last game, we're going to win.
Mm,
And we did, we went out and won that last game. And then obviously got to the World Series, but there was a moment when the players just start believing in something bigger than themselves. I think that's the essence of every team I've been on. It's been great.
sure. So you mentioned that like kind of a turning point in the season. Um, what what do you think causes that? I guess like there's a turning point, and then guys start to believe because I know that you guys have have a culture, and that's led by Torey Lovello, and you're a big part of that too. But what do you think that switch like happens with that switch from being like, all right, we don't really believe that we're going to do this to, all right, we can play against Harper and
Yeah.
Schwarber and all these big boys. What happens there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think we obviously work hard at developing our culture and the things that we want to stand for. And Tori's has been a tremendous asset in that area. And just he has a lot of different words, but love, trust, commitment, and effort are kind of his big four. And so that micro messaging goes on all year. And we had a moment after the All Star break last year where we were struggling. Like we were really bad. We couldn't score. We weren't pitching good. And, a couple weeks after that, I mean, when you go on a drought like that, a lot of times you're done. But we just found our way. And it was like, okay, let's keep, I think Tori had a meeting and just let's keep doing what we do well and work our process. And don't worry about the other teams. Let's just do what we do well. It's funny because it reminds me of like John Wooden mentality, which is Tori was a UCLA guy. I'm a John Wooden guy from a high school coach of mine that taught me a lot about it. And so he just kept that message in front of the team. And then all of a sudden, we started playing good. And I mean, that obviously makes you believe in yourself. But
Mm,
we just kept working our process and trusted who we were as a team. We didn't have a whole lot of like home run hitting type players. We're just going to play great defense. We're going to be fast on the bases. We're going to put pressure on the other teams. And we just kept doing that. And all of a sudden, we kind of found our stride. So I think that was the shifting moment. But if I had to rewind, it's like stick to your process. It sounds very cliche, but like identify who you are and what works for you and stick to your process.
sure. Yeah, and that's not easy, especially with younger players, I'm sure. But that just speaks to the probably the leadership that was in the clubhouse, maybe, and just emphasizing sticking to it. So it's great. You mentioned your high school coach, so I wanted to ask you about him too, because I was listening to a few other interviews where you talk about him, and it
Yeah.
seems like he really instilled a sense of belief in you. Like he gave you a kick in the butt, right? That was the first thing, and then he was like, "All right."
Right.
Like, but that almost laid a foundation. So I was just curious for you to share that a little bit.
Yeah. This is my high school basketball coach. I grew up in a tiny town in New Mexico, less than 1,000 people, a place called Carrizozo, New Mexico. If you know where that's at, you're really good. So most people, they don't even know where New Mexico's at, much less this tiny town that I grew up in. And by straight gift, he ended up coming to our small town and agreed to coach the high school basketball team. And his name was Ron Becker, and he was just an incredible person. And I think I learned about life as much or more than I did about basketball. I think when I rewind and I look at, what did I get from him was like, how do you achieve more than you even believed you could? He was just always working in that space and like how he could challenge a player and he always challenged them with love, which is funny. It's what Torey Lavello does really well too. When somebody knows that you really care about them and that you're invested in them and that you love them, you can say some more direct, challenging things and get the best out of those people. And I think that's the essence of what I try to do now. But yeah, he changed my life. There was a moment I was a freshman in high school and I really thought I was the goods, and little did I know, he saw right through all of that and he saw the potential in me that I couldn't even see in myself. And he called me out one day and just said, you'll never be as good as you should be until you learn how to work and be committed to something every day. And man, it hit me hard. And, I took it hard. And what I made it mean in my mind is I'm going to prove this guy wrong. And I think he could have left it right there and just let me try to prove him wrong. But instead, like the next day and the day after that, he built me back up. He said, look, like this is what you have to do to reach your full potential and maybe even beyond what you think you could be. And so that really got me going because he kept showing me a way to achieve, not just tell me that I wasn't achieving my full potential. He gave me ways of doing it, and that was the most incredible gift I ever got because I was just like, wow, what a profound message. And lo and behold, went on and did some amazing things with our high school team, and it was all because of him. He had some tough like medical things when I was a senior, ended up getting cancer, you know, long story short, he ended up surviving, but we had to really find ourselves as a team, and it really helped me with understanding who I was as a person and who I could be as a leader, because I was kind of inherently the leader of our small community team, but at the same time, it just taught me more about life and how to lead people. And then I went back and coached with him years later, and that's when I really learned the methods that he was using to get the most out of people. And he taught fantastic basketball, so all of that went along with winning a lot. But I really discovered who I was as a coach, later on when I started coaching with him. And then I just have carried that over, coached a lot of youth basketball teams, and that led into coaching people in the sports medicine performance world. And we all have coaches, and some people just don't look at coaches outside of athletics, but we need life coaches, people that coach us along our path. And so that's where he gave me an incredible gift, and I just try to hand it on to other people.
Sure. Yeah. It's awesome how that just one person can impact the rest of your life, right? And
Yeah.
I think everybody who played sports, or even if you didn't play sports, you can just kind of point to that one person that might have believed in you to push you to be a little bit better than you ever thought you could be, right? So, what were you mentioned some of his methods? Are there any that come to mind for you, like specifically that that he shared with you when you came back? I suppose that you saw
Like when I started coaching with him.
when you started coaching with him, because I'm sure you saw it from a different
Yeah.
perspective. What you're saying, like what
No,
methods did
yeah,
he
it's
use?
funny because I teach so many of his methods daily, and if I do presentations, it's funny, everything that's intertwined into the messages I'm delivering, is a lot of it's from him. I would say 80% of it, combined with other things I've learned along the way. He always taught John Wooden's pyramid of success. And, I just remember the very top block being competitive greatness. He always talked about that. He's like, if you do everything else, you take care of your process, you do all of these blocks underneath the bottom here, then it leads to the top block, which is competitive greatness, which is being your very best when your very best is called for. Like, I can just recite that right now because of what he taught. And I'm like, wow, that's profound. And it ended up happening for me. And when I was a senior, the last game I ever played as a high school senior, I just had an unbelievable game. And he came up to me after the game and he goes, that's what competitive greatness is, because you've done all of the work below that led you to this moment. And so that principle is what I try to teach other people, is like, you have to put in the work and build a really strong foundation if you're going to get that peak moment that we all want to experience. And so one of the other things that I learned from him when we were coaching together is I remember one day before practice, the kids were warming up, and he came over to me and he goes, Ken, you know what we got to do today? And I'm like, no, coach, what do we got? And he's like, we got to change two of these kids' lives. There was 12 to 15, I think. And I'm confused in the moment, going, well, why just two? And he goes, well, he said, inevitably there's going to be ones that won't let you change their lives. There's going to be ones that think they want to change, but they won't. And he goes, if we can change two of them's lives, then we've done a really good service to those kids. And in that moment, what I heard was, wow, this isn't as hard as what I thought. Because in my mind was like, we got to change all 15 of these kids. And he made it simple. And then subsequently in my career afterwards, that's what I figured out. Like, I'm just not going to fret a whole lot that I didn't change everybody. And change is kind of a bad word, that I didn't inspire everybody to
Hmm.
see the best in themselves. And so it's like, ooh. And then when I started coaching on my own, that was my mission, is like, can I get each one of these kids to see that they probably have their parking brake on and they have way more potential. And so that method, or that ability to use your language and your position to change lives is one of the methods, man. I use that every day. So that's, I can tell you hundreds of stories that me and him experienced together, that I use today. But that's the most profound, I think, biggest rock that I would say I use.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I can relate to that because I've coached a travel ball team for the last couple of years, and it's 17-year-olds, like some pretty talented kids. They're going to play. These days, it's tough to even go play Division I baseball. So a couple kids are going to play D1 and D2, D3. But that's what I would beat myself up at times. I'd be like, man, why is not everybody getting the message almost?
Yeah.
And be like, all right, you have to, like you said, like you have to change every single kid's life. Obviously, you want it to permeate throughout the team. Which maybe I'm curious to even hear your thoughts on that. Like,
Yeah.
if you're only getting through to one or two kids or three kids, hopefully more. But
Yeah.
how does
Well,
that say? Maybe that speaks to the culture. Yeah.
yeah, Joe, you inevitably do, but you have to start there with getting one or two to shift, and then the rest just kind of follow because everybody wants to be a part of something greater than them. Every human wants to be part of a really cool team or a really close team or all of that. We all want to be a part of that. And that's where starting, he made it simple for me. Like, you don't have to run to the top of the mountain. You just have to put one foot in front of the other. And one of the other things that you probably, in today's society and some of the things we hear, like be present, right? And everybody's probably heard that. Be present. Don't live in the past or the future. Just be present right now. And with all of the things coming at us in our youth now, that's hard to do. We got cell phones and we got,
Mm.
Instant information. And what he taught was long before we even knew what a cell phone was. But he said, hey, look, I want you guys to really get this. There's three things in your life, and each one has to be the most important thing in your life. And when he broke it down, it was like, okay, we're going to start with school. Like, when you're in school, that's the most important thing in your life. You got to go take care of that because that's going to sustain you for life, a good education. Second thing was your family and your faith. Like be committed to that. When you're at home, you're all in with them, and don't be at school when or don't be mind space at school when you're home with your family, or don't be in the basketball space when you're at home with your family. But when it's basketball time, I'm going to ask you to be all in on this. And what it was a simplified way of creating us being present to that moment, because when you focus and you really give the effort and intense focus that something needs, that's when you improve the most. So he had a really simple way, another method of getting us to focus on that, on the moment, and then building those blocks by putting one at a time. Really created, all of the things that I see are successful over and over and over. And I've seen it happen so many times now that, sometimes you believe something, but you really don't know. You just believe it. But now I've seen it happen so many times. I know it. I know what it takes to really get somebody to take those next steps and get to a space where they're just better than they ever thought they could be.
Mm. Man, yeah, just being present. And that's how often are we actually present these days, man? I'm on my phone. I'm like, yep, I'm working. My fiance is downstairs, right? It's like it's tough.
Yeah.
It's really hard, but like when you take a step back and think about that, it puts it in perspective for sure. So I
Sure.
appreciate that. Yeah. So I was curious, Ken, because you were at New Mexico State, and I think you wanted to play basketball. I don't even know if you played baseball at the time, right? I think you played basketball,
Yeah.
maybe football, and
Yep.
it sounded like you got hurt when you were in college. You tore your ACL.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that what sparked your interest to get into what you were ultimately doing?
Yeah. If I could rewind just a little bit, my dad actually played football at New Mexico State, went on to play for the Eagles.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so I was in high school, and I had a moment where I was playing football. In our small town, you played football, basketball, and track. That's all they had. They didn't have baseball. Um, so we did that. I ended up getting, like, junior year, I got a hit in the quad. I had like a deep quad knee problem, and we didn't have athletic trainers then, which is one of my titles. And so my dad said, "Hey, go down and see my athletic trainer in Las Cruces." It was a couple hours drive. Our football coach took me down there. He treated my leg, and I'm like, wow, I feel way better. So I was like intrigued at that moment. Anyway, fast forward, I went to New Mexico State. I had a football scholarship, but I didn't really want to play football. I wanted to play basketball. So I tried to walk on, ended up tearing my ACL, spent a year in the training room, and I just really loved what I was seeing in the serving of other people, which has always been there for me. I just wanted to serve other people. So, I learned a lot about the rehab and got into the field, and then that just kind of took off from there. I was, talking about being present to that field. That's all I really was into. And then subsequently, I worked with the college baseball team, later on um, like my junior or senior year. And then next thing you know, I got a job with the Pittsburgh Pirates in the summer, and that led to the Atlanta Braves and to the, Tampa Bay Rays, and eventually to the Diamondbacks. So I had no real baseball experience per se, other than what I experienced in college working with the team. But it all started by being an athlete, and it really helped me when I got hurt relate to people that were hurt. So I'm like, well, yeah, I understand the mental and the physical that goes along with getting a player back to full health and competing again, because that's something that I always cherished and experienced that I think helped me out.
Sure. Well, the mental and physical, yeah, so mental and physical, right? Because it seems like, and again, I've heard you say this on a few other uh, podcasts you've been hosting on, but like may have started as a physical therapist, or that's what you thought you were going into.
Right.
But as you've learned so much over the years, it's become more of the mental side of it, and building out teams and just all these other things that go into it. So you mentioned the servant leadership though.
Hmm?
I'm curious just how you think about, or how you approach your leadership style now with your team
Yeah.
and folks you're recruiting. I think that'd be great to hear.
Yeah. So servant leadership was something I never even heard of. Um, I don't know, till about 15 years ago, I guess. I read a book called Servant Leadership, and I don't even know how I got onto it. But it was inevitably part of, who I was underneath. My mom was like an ultra serving lady. And I don't know, I probably got that from her. She just served people her whole life. So I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like serving people really gets you out of self, your own self, and really puts you into helping someone else, which is actually a reward for you. It sounds weird, but it's like, okay, hey, I'm going to serve somebody else, but it actually serves me because I get the joy out of watching them. And that's where I think coaching, that's probably why people are drawn to coaching, is helping others. I think if they really sifted it down. So I read this book called Servant Leadership, and it just really hit a high note with me because I was leading people, and I was leading them based on the things that I had done, and improving their skills and all of these other things that was pretty successful. It just wasn't as successful as what I know now because I really didn't understand that I am serving them to help them get to where they want to get. Because in that early phase of my career, I was trying to almost not drag them, but show them the way and everybody follow me. Now I don't do that at all. What I do is I sit down with people and I ask them where they want to go, and I tell them, "Hey, I'm your tour guide, and I'm going to help you get there." And in part of that, I love you, and I want to serve you, and I love you so much that I'm going to tell you some stuff that you may not want to hear, and I mean it. Like it's not something you can say lightly and not mean it. So when I say that, it's like, I really do care about my people, and I want to see them grow the most they can grow. So I just serve them, and that serving can mean a lot of different things. And that's the greatest joy that I get out of life. I have no other race to run. I got no other places to go, no other titles to get. I just love serving people and seeing them grow. In that growth is the gift back to me.
It's cool. How do you? So I'm thinking of this. How do you keep that candor amongst somebody that you don't know as well, like maybe a newer member on the team versus somebody like maybe
Yeah.
Tori, who you have a really good relationship with?
Yeah.
Like, how do you keep that consistent across everybody?
Yeah, Joe, I think it's really simple, hard. Okay. Have you ever heard that simple, hard? It's
It's a
simple,
good one.
hard
Yeah, simple
because
but not easy. Yeah,
yeah, most people will say something, but they actually don't back it up with their actions. Okay. It's like your audio doesn't match your video. I see that a lot. People will say something like, "Hey, I'm going to be there at 2 o'clock," and then they show up at 2:15. Well, you said two, and then you showed up at 2:15. Now, granted, you may be caught up in a traffic but call, or do whatever you got to do to make sure that your integrity stays in place and that you do what you say you're going to do and do it that way all the time. I think that's the essence of the starting point. And then the other piece that I love to layer on is, the world, the way we see it is, it's not quite is the way we see it. So you gotta bear with me here for a second. The world is not the way it is. The world is the way we are. And I learned that from a pretty incredible personal coach named Steve Hardison. What it meant was, look, we see the world a certain way, but it's not really the way it is. But what we start doing is seeing the world the way we are. And so if you can flip this and start thinking about, we see the world the way we're being. So how we show up each day is who we're being, right? Like if I show up miserable to work all the time, then I'm just a miserable boss. If I show up to work going, man, I want to love and serve my people and get them to a place they never thought they could go, that's a totally different space. And so I think when you sift down as a human who you are and what you stand for, and then you show up that way every day, you know, you're going to have some rough days, but if you're still committed to who you're being each day, it just, I can tell you that. And I'm like, Joe, I'm here to love and serve you. And I've met you a couple times, but that's who I am. So like, you're not going to alter who I am. Only I alter who I am. And I have a choice in who I show up to be each day. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a deep thought, but
Yeah.
it's man, it's really true, because if you're showing up as somebody that's inconsistent, that's who
Mhm.
you are. That's really
And
who you are.
and subsequently, if you show up inconsistent, guess what you're going to see? You're going to see a lot of inconsistent
It's a
people working
result.
underneath you. If
Mm.
you show up
Mm.
as an a-hole, guess what? You're going to see a lot of those that you work with. If you show up as a loving, serving leader, you're going to see a lot of loving, serving people. It's your choice. That's the beauty in it, is what most humans think is that, oh, it's not my choice. This happened to me. I had a little bad luck, a little funk here, whatever. Yeah, those are things that happen to you, but you have a choice in that moment to say, this happened to me or this happened for me. And I always try to choose the choice of, this is happening for me, and it's going to make me better. In this uncomfortability is growth. And so now I'm just going to show up being, love and service is what I've really simplified it down to.
Man, thanks for sharing that, Ken. It's like I said, it's a deep thought that you really have to follow. But like when you think about it, it is simple. Like you said, it's pretty simple. But
Yeah.
we complicate things. Yeah,
Right.
things get layered, and then you kind of break away from that.
Yeah.
So
The human mind will run a lot of places
yeah,
out of
yeah,
fear and uncertainty of how things may land. And I think that's when we can really get to know ourselves. I always tell people this that I coach is, you have to get to know you and your point of view and what limits you and what makes you go first before you can actually coach and help others. If not, you're kind of doing it with a really shallow bag of tools. So get to know yourself first and be very vulnerable and open and just go, hey, this is where I suck, or I'm not good at this. And that's the beauty of the team that I have around me, is we all share and help each other see the blind spots. And then, boy, when you can see the blind spots, that creates awareness for you that allows you to help other people in a way quicker space than if you don't have people to show you where your blind spots, or if you're closed to really learning about yourself. And I think self-development is like the number one thing I preach to my people. We can teach you the skills and all the things that you need to be an athletic trainer or strength and conditioning coach or mental performance coach, but you got to get okay with yourself if you're really going to help other people.
well, Ken, I mean, it's no like it's clear why I think the Diamondbacks have had success over the last few years. Like I know when you earlier on, you guys went through some struggles, but it seemed like once everybody kind of bought into, and this was one thing I was curious about too, because Torrey, like it seemed like he almost went through and sorry, we don't have to specifically talk
Yeah.
about him, but just like
No, we
anybody.
can. It's great.
Um,
I think you're right on to something that we should step into. Is
okay,
Torrey
because it seems
Torrey
like he
was in
went
a
through that experience
yeah.
himself,
He was in a
right?
really bad spot. I can't remember the exact year. I think a couple years ago. When he first showed up, we went to the playoffs. It was good, and then we went backwards after that, and we got down to 100 losses. And this is public stuff. He said it a
Mhm.
bunch of times. He was really hurt and down, and like, am I going to survive this job and all that? And so we had a talk one day. It was just me and him, and I still remember we were in Houston and setting up in the stands, and I said, we were talking about culture, and I said, Torrey, culture will carry you through the tough times, but I hear you talk about culture, but I really don't know what it is. I've been here with you, but I don't. There's no words on the wall that say it. It's not a consistent message, and he just never thought about it that way. So I sat down with him and I said, tell me what's important to you. And I'll write it down and we'll kind of create a diagram and then you can really like follow it. And then we can teach around it. But to your point, he was down bad, right? And we had lost 100 games that year. Hey, I was with Tampa back in the day. We lost 100 games several times. So I've been down that deep road. But he always says I was in a dark spot. And if you rewind back on some of the talk we had, that actually was happening for us. Because look what it did was made us sit down and create, what do we really stand for? What do we really want our culture to look like? And how do we move that forward? So something really shitty or bad happened to us, an uncomfortable moment that created what we're stepping into now. So, like, we should think that moment instead of, wow, that was, some people look back and go, man, I never want to experience that again. I'm like, that made us grow. And you have that choice in your mind is that the negative going to grow me or is it going to keep me negative? And I think that's the point you were going after. But it was like, wow, that took us to another level of culture and connection and everybody buying in, because nobody wants to experience that feeling. Okay. They just don't.
No. And if you do experience it, you want to get out of it. Yeah, ASAP. So yeah, it's really cool to hear. Ken, I really want to ask you about like communication. I know communication and listening are huge for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe just I'm curious then, like what is effective communication? Like what does that look like to you?
Yeah, man, what a great loaded question right there. It's like, that's actually what me and you are doing right now.
You're
You
trying.
asked me a
I'm trying.
question. You asked me a great question. Now I've got to use my language, which is the space that we all learn in. And these are all things. Look, Joe, none of the stuff I have up here is mine. I stole it from somebody else. I'm just the first to admit it. Like, I've had some incredible teachers along my path of communication. A guy named Peter Crone, uh, a lady named Romleen Goggin, another guy named Devin Bandison, and I can name multiple others, teammates that have helped me refine my communication. Because I think what we all think of in the space of communication is, I'm going to tell this person something. Instead of, communication is most powerful when you're actually just listening. Let me really listen to what Joe has to say, and then really just be between my head and Joe's head is the space in between there. That's where communication happens. If I'm in my head and you're in your head, our communication is going to be pretty shallow. But if I can just get in that space, really try to feel where you're coming from instead of letting my ego, and this is another human trap, our ego starts trying to make us right. And I always say, I have a saying, just get off of being right, because when you're right, that makes everybody else wrong. Just be curious. And if you can stay in that curious space, we can stay in the space between our heads and be curious about, hey, what is it that Joe wants to know? Or what's the question he's asking? And then I can be really present with giving you, my thoughts or beliefs on the way back, and you can question them back. I think in that conversation, a lot of people get defensive because they hear, no, this is what I know, which I would question. or I believe, and then they start this kind of resistance with each other, and that conversation will never go somewhere. And more importantly, it'll cost both of you something that you're both after, which is an understanding and a connection to do something. So I really think that's important, is to be a great listener. And then the other thing that I always think in communication is that when you leave the conversation, or when it's going to wrap up, is that you have an agreement. Do we agree that I heard you? Is this what you said? Yes. Okay, great. This is what I said. Do you agree with that? Okay, cool. We want to do this. Do we both agree with that? And when you have an agreement leaving the conversation, then you have some powerful places to go. If you have what happens, I think, in coaching a lot of times is there's an expectation, right? Oh, I expect you as a player to do this, but the player may be like, I don't agree with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or if you're just having a conversation with a coworker, well, they may not agree, and so that expectation or that non-understanding will not go very far versus an agreement that'll take you a long ways. So that's really important understanding and distinction to get. A great listening is communication, and an agreement to end in the communication is really important.
Sure. So it also has to be important to be consistent with that, right? Because I'm just thinking like, um, just everyday conversation, right? Like you're just having a conversation with, like you said, a coworker, or whether it's a friend on the phone, just kind of shooting the breeze, whatever it is. Is it fair, or would you say that sometimes maybe for you personally, like, do you show up the same guy in every single one of those conversations, or is that kind of catered to maybe who you're speaking with? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's another man. You're asking some really good questions. Um,
I'm just, that.
yeah, really good question. So, two things: do I show up the same way every time? Yeah, I try to show up as love and service everywhere I go, every day. Okay, that simplifies it. I don't have to be somebody I'm not, and also I've got to understand what makes the other person go. So I may have to ask really good questions, is communication. Hey, what is it that you want to do? Where do you want to go? I love asking the staff that I work with that question, because none of this is about me. This is about you and how we get you where you want to go and take your parking brake off. Because we all have limitations on ourselves. All of us. Like, I don't care. There's not a human on earth that can then say, I don't have a limitation. Guaranteed they do in some shape or form. Some of them are just more aware of where their limitations are, and that's the power. So I think, to start with, I've really got to try to understand that person's point of view so that I can ask the right questions and lead them to the right spot. So that I still think that's consistency, because I'm still serving them in all of this. So I want to make that simple. Um, and do I show up differently? I think certain people need different coaching. If I'm coaching them, I'm like, hey, are
Mhm.
you okay with some hard coaching? Because some people only respond, if you're really straight and direct. Some people want that. Some people don't. Some people are like, ooh, like, I can't be direct. So I think that's one of the gifts that I picked up. God given gift is the way I say it, is feel. Like, I grew up on a ranch where you have to kind of really be aware of your surroundings. A horse might run you over, a cow might kick you, bit by a snake. I don't know, all kinds of stuff, right? So you created awareness, and at least that's where I feel like I got it. So when I'm around another human, I really try to listen to their vibration and it's what they're saying and what they're feeling, their body language and all that. Because there's more than just communication, or verbal communication. There's body language too. If somebody's like, all right, when I'm talking to them, they're like this, I can already see resistance in that. So I've got to wind back and go, okay, why is there resistance? How can I get them out of that for it to be an effective communication and it goes somewhere?
Yeah, no, but the body language, yeah, and that's interesting. Your sixth sense, the feel, yeah, just growing up. So that's something you feel like you have, or had as a kid, like that's you just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I've always, it's one of the things that that I always talk about is like, I love building teams and I'm not really good at a lot of stuff. The one thing that I'm really good at is picking great people. And it's instinctively in there. I don't really have to think about it really hard. It just happens for me. And I can remember being in fourth grade trying to pick uh, the best football team in my small little town. We had to like one side of the town versus the other, like this little kind of pickup football game. And so I got to be the captain for one side of the town. And I'm like, all right, I got to pick the very best players so that we can win. And, inevitably, that was just the way my mind space was always at. I remember being in high school and we had a football team, 11-man football, but we only had like 100 kids in high school. So pretty much all of the guys had to play, and I'd be out recruiting guys that, we're big, strong guys. They just didn't play football. I'm like, hey, we need you on the football team, and so that was always something I've just always had since the time I was young. And how do I get somebody to buy into let's work as a team? So it again, like some people have to work at it. It can all be taught, but it just came natural to me. So I really think that's one of the gifts that I got. And I don't have many, but that's one, picking really good people.
There you go. That's what I said. I don't know if I have many either, but the communicate. So you do think it can all be taught then? Like that's what I've seen. I've seen different things. I feel like I asked these questions too. Like you feel like the communication and some of that feel. I don't know. Can you teach that? I don't know if you can teach that, but
Yeah, it's another loaded question. I ask myself that a lot of times. Like, can we teach feel? I think feel is awareness, right?
mm,
Like, there's different a field. I have a feel on the basketball when I shoot it, or baseball when I throw it. That's a certain feel. Or is there a feel that, like, hey, I'm not connecting with this person? That type of feel, I think, is just awareness. Like, and awareness really doesn't start to happen until you're aware of yourself and maybe how you come out to others. That's a really big piece of what we try to teach here with our team is like, hey, do you realize, if I sit down with Tori, hey, Tori, I think this is how you come out to me in this particular subject. And he'll be like, oh, really? Like, I didn't even know I did that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just being a mirror for you. This is the way I hear it. And sometimes multiple opinions in that space will help. I always tell the people that I work with, even if I'm the leader, I'm just a part of the team. I need to hear what you guys all think so that we can make the best decision for the team. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear because I'm the quote boss. Like that doesn't do any of us any good. So that's the part of servant leadership that I love. Tell me what I need to hear, not what you think I want to hear. And I think that creates awareness when you can really start giving each other, have somebody go, hey, how do I come out to you? Be vulnerable. And they may say some stiff stuff that you're like, oh my gosh. It's kind of what Coach Becker did for me as a freshman in high school. He goes, do you realize that you'll never be as good as you should be because of A, B, C, and D? And I'm like, he didn't ask me if or I didn't ask him to share it. And he didn't ask me if he could share it. He just shared it. But there's other ways of us all getting awareness around how we're coming out, which will increase your awareness, which allows you to create uh, the ability to help others find their own awareness.
sure. So then, all right. So you guys have that clearly set up, and it seems like Tori's just open to learning because it's a lot of people would or could get offended by that. Like if it's not
Absolutely.
right, a lot of people get
Mm-hmm.
offended. What would you suggest then to somebody who maybe doesn't have that? Like
Yeah.
seek it out. I don't mean it's
Great question. I think you have to. What are you committed to? Would be my next question. Like what? Hey, Tori, or all the coaches, or everybody in the baseball operations or player, what are we committed to? And that's called a shared purpose. It's like, no, we're committed to winning a World Series, right? Or we're committed to. There's a lot of things you can be committed to, but if we're truly committed to that, or we as coaches or sports medicine performance people, we're committed to our player. At least that's our overlying message that I preach to everybody that works in my department. We're committed to the player. We leave our ego to the side so that we can get our player out there on the field performing their absolute very best. It has nothing to do with us. Now, in that commitment, I would say is not knowing, where your limitations are, or, maybe how you're coming out is not effective. Is that being committed to our player? Generally the answer is, well, no, that's committed to you. You're
Mhm.
committed to just staying in your safe place and not hearing how you can be a more effective coach or communicator or whatever it is. That's the space that I'm like, well, if we're really committed to the player, that's what we all said, then our video has to match our audio again. That's a Devin Bandison saying. He loves saying that. It's
I
so
like
good. I
that.
love it.
Yeah.
And so if we're committed to that, then you got to check your ego in and hear what it is about yourself that some of us don't want to hear. Trust me, I've been in many moments. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to hear this, and then I shift and go, yeah, I need to hear this. And so it just depends your level of commitment to the team, and I would even challenge your level of commitment to yourself should open you up to hear the stuff that you really don't want to hear, because that's what's going to make you the best coach, the best whatever father or husband, friend that you're going to be, is by hearing the stuff that maybe you can't see on your own.
Without a doubt. Yeah, that's awesome. So then Ken, so you have, and I'm not gonna say this, you have years of experience. You've been doing it for a while. And I what do you think from your perspective you want to improve still? Like you have all these tools under your belt, you're teaching and you're leading a lot of people. Like where do you think you would still need to improve, if anything?
Yeah. Look, there's one of my kind of personal commitments is that I'm always here to grow, and I think when you as a coach or just any human, you get out of that space of I need to continue. I don't. Let me rephrase. Scratch all of that. Scratch all that. I don't need to grow. I want to grow.
Mm.
Okay. There's another guy named Chris Dorris, who's a good friend of mine. He has a book called Mental Mantras, and he loves to say, just delete all that. Let's start over. So delete all that. I want to grow. I think I'm curious, and that drives me to learn how I can become better. And I always look at, some people just want to walk to the top of the mountain and be all right. I'm good. I reached it. I just have never had that mindset. I think, our time on earth here is really short, and we're only going to get a small walk through it. And I just want to always be the best I can be. And that mountain you'll never reach, but it's fun just like climbing up the mountain one step at a time. So I have a continuous growth mindset, and that's what I love to try to get others to really see is that once you get stuck where you're at, like you dig a big trench around this is what I know and I don't need to know anymore. I think you quit growing, and then you're gonna inevitably run into other potholes. And the way our world evolves, it's like, well, I don't want to use his cell phone. I'm like, well, good luck with that one. That one's going to really probably set you back. So we have to be adaptable. That's one of the things that I believe in firmly is, I don't want to be the old guy that's not adaptable. So I always like continue to grow and learn, and that serves my people. I'm if I'm committed to what I said, which is loving and serving my people, I have to grow, or I get to grow to serve them.
I love it, Ken. Man, well, thank you so much. Really, this is great. Like I said, it makes sense why you guys have had success the last couple of years. I hope you continue to have success. Unless you face the Phillies towards the end of the year here, then I'll be rooting for you until
Yeah,
that
we'll,
happens.
we'll
But
we'll take that challenge, Joe. I think one of the things too, before we cut,
yeah,
I wouldn't want to be just the sole front man here for why we've had success, because none of that's true. We got an incredible group of people, man. They all are busting it to learn and grow. Incredible group of players, front office, and of course, our whole organization. They're really committed to people, and I'm just lucky to really be here with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and everything they've done for me has been incredible too, and they've allowed me this space to grow myself and to grow other people. So I'm forever thankful to them too. So I just want everybody to know that it's not me by myself. I'm
Yeah,
just a
exactly.
small part of a team.
100%. Yeah, it's an awesome team around you. So, um, well, Ken, thanks again for taking the time for this. I know you're a busy man, so you shared, man, a lot of good stuff, a lot of good nuggets in here, and I'm looking forward to putting it out there for people. So,
Well, I appreciate you, Joe. I mean, anytime there's a platform and opportunity like this, it just grows me because it makes me refine my own thoughts and really know that, what I'm handing out is quality stuff. And, if it's not, then I got to go back to the drawing board and make sure that I'm doing what I'm committed to. So I appreciate you having me on here.
sure thing. Anytime. I would love to have you again in the future. So, all right, Ken.
All right.
Thank you
Take
again.
care.